Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magma Rage's episode 73. I'm here with Pandemonia, as always. We've got quite a lot to talk about today, Pandemonia.
Yeah, new soda content's on the way, new shiny toys.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely going to be the biggest talking point for today. But after that, we're also going to talk a little bit about Spell Mage, the new hyped Mage deck that I know personally I've been playing quite a lot, that I like to call Do Stuff Mage. As opposed to the other Conjurer's Mage deck where you kind of don't do anything for a while. And then we've also got some esports stuff to talk about. The GM Grandmasters is starting this weekend, as well as the Metal State Pro Series and some more local esports side of things. So first of all, let's get to talking about the Dalaran Heist. That is the solo content that we're going to be getting to come with Rise of Shadows. There's quite a lot of content here. One of the main reasons we're going to be talking about this so much is I actually had an opportunity to sit down with the Hearthstone devs and chat to them about the Dalaran Heist. So they kind of did a cool little roundtable thing with us. Us being myself representing IGN Africa and some other journalists from other different publications. We kind of had like a roundtable interview with them where they showed us through all the details of the expansion. Of the solo content, and then we kind of had some questions, and then I also managed to have a bit of a one-on-one chat with them afterwards. So there's two different articles that are going to be out on IGN for that are related to this. The first of which is kind of a rundown of the expansion. So if you don't want to listen to us talk about the expansion for the next 30 minutes or so, you can go and read that, or if you just want a recap of the key features of the expansion, you can go and read that. It'll be in the description on YouTube. And then another piece that's going to be coming out later in the week is a discussion with the Hearthstone devs around the design for these solo adventures, which was really cool. I got to chat to them more about that on the one-on-one. Okay, so let's get on to the Dalaran Heist. So the Dalaran Heist is broken up into 5 different chapters, kind of similar to how we saw Wings before in some of the older content like Naxxramas or League of Explorers. And then in each of these 5 chapters, you can pick from one of 9 henchmen, one for each class, so basically the 9 classes, and then you engage on a kind of a dungeon run style run for each of those classes through the chapter.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you say, it's like a hybrid of like the old school, but it's still there's the random element of the dungeon runs. So I think there's 75 different bosses.
Yeah,
and like some of them are going to be I think a lot of them are sort of generic random ones, but some of them are like restricted to certain chapters.
Yep.
Kind of. I think they're trying to make them like sort of thematic.
Yeah.
And as you beat these bosses, you're going to unlock more hero powers and starting decks, which is one of the major differences I think they made from this or previous like adventures. In the beginning, it was mostly build your own deck.
Yeah.
Then with like the dungeon run, it was just one. They gave you a special hero power, but then it was like build one deck. Now they kind of, combine all of that. And so I think you start off with like the mage one, for example, starts out with the normal mage hero power, but you can then unlock the 2 extras, the 2 additional hero powers.
Yeah. So Rakunisha is the mage character, or the mage henchman. And as you said, you start off with Fire Blast, as we can see here, and then you unlock Burning Wit, which is 1 mana hero power that reduces the cost of a random card in your hand by 2, and Frostburn, which is a hero power that freezes a character. If it's already frozen, it deals 2 damage to it. So you kind of get some different hero powers that you can base building your deck around. And as you mentioned, you kind of build your deck through that kind of dungeon run style, picking from treasures and different sets of cards as you go along. So that's kind of meant to make the whole experience very repeatable, right? And there's a lot of replayability here. I mean, there's just so much content in this, actually. We have like as we already mentioned, the 5 different chapters and the 9 henchmen. So if you wanted to complete each chapter with each different henchman, that's already 45, equivalents of like dungeon runs. And then we're talking about like those starting decks. So we talked about the hero powers. They unlock by completing little kind of sub objectives or tasks. So like having to play 100 elementals or draw 50 cards or something like that. So when you're playing with the class, you will unlock those by completing those little side challenges. And then there's also the starting decks, which are just unlocked by defeating bosses as their class. So with Rakanishu and Mage, for example, you'll unlock the second deck after beating, I think it's like 3 bosses or something. So you don't have to complete runs, but as you kind of complete runs, you'll unlock more of this different starting decks. And so that means there's 45 total runs you can do just to complete each chapter with each class. And then you can kind of do that 4 times, once for each starting deck. For a total of 180 runs if you kind of ace it in every single run. And then we haven't even got to the fact that there's 3 different modes you can play it in: normal, heroic, and anomaly mode. And we'll come back to the different difficulties, but that leaves just a ridiculous amount of replayability.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's kind of like they've taken all the previous solo content and they've put it to shame, because if you look, like, if I remember back to Naxxramas now, there was literally, each wing was like essentially five sort of scenarios, and that was it.
Yeah.
You unlocked certain cards, cool, but like that was it. Whereas like this, it's, first of all, I think each dungeon run is like 7. I think it's, have they said how long each run's going to be?
I think it's the same length the dungeon runs were, right? I think so. 8 or 9 bosses, if I'm not mistaken. But the dungeon runs, those were like once per each class that you kind of needed to do it to fully complete the dungeon run thing.
Yeah.
Whereas now we've got 5 chapters of that for each class. So yeah.
That's good. Yeah. And to try and comment, like, so obviously the completionist within me is going to want to try and
to spend hundreds of hours playing this.
Well, that's what isn't that what they advertise? It's like over what's it? What did the devs tell you? What are they advertising it as? How many hours?
I think they said like hundreds of hours, but as a passing comment. So I wouldn't exactly time it and come back to them and say, no, I finished it in 76 hours. You lied to me.
You lied. Give me back my money.
Give me back my 2,800 gold or $20, which is what this will cost you total. It's 700 gold per chapter. You get the first chapter for free. The first and second chapters will be launching this week on May the 16th. And then thereafter, there's a new chapter added every week. So I think it'll be on the Thursday of every week. They're going to be adding the third, the fourth, and then the fifth chapters. You get 15 packs, 15 Rise of Shadow packs, and 1 Golden Classic pack total as your rewards, plus some card backs and Zale, which we'll come back to just now. But the packs, it's basically split like 3 per chapter, and you get the Golden Classic pack when you finished all 5 chapters, as well as the card back for normal mode. So most of those are all just the rewards in normal mode, which is where most of the rewards are heavily weighted to. And then we have heroic mode, which is mostly just for that card back and the completionists like you.
Yeah. And heroic usually, I mean, they try and make it obviously more difficult to kind of challenge, those who, let's say, have been playing the game for longer or you're better at the game, because they don't want to. I think the main aim is they want all the like packs and stuff to be accessible to everyone, right? Whether you're casual, whether you're competitive, and then they kind of have added the heroic, like they say. I think they said in an article somewhere I read where they were basically saying they're going to make the normal mode a bit easier, but the heroic mode is going to become they're making it a bit tougher.
Yeah, so basically they've kind of taken the dungeon run kind of difficulty and amped it up for heroics and made the normals a little bit easier than dungeon runs were.
Yeah.
So it's not going to maybe take you as many attempts to complete it on normal, but it's probably going to take you a lot more to complete it on heroic. You're going to have to try out different strategies through your runs to try and defeat the different heroic bosses. And because of that, randomization you spoke about, each heroic run is going to be quite different depending on which bosses you face as well. So the heroic is going to be quite challenging. I mean, they said that they had tested it on their final design team, the team that usually does balance for like the expansions before they come out. The likes of Chucky and I think Xr's on that team as well. A lot of players that are pretty good at Hearthstone. So if they found it challenging, it could be quite challenging indeed. So I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how difficult it actually is.
And then even on top of that, I think arguably probably harder. I don't know. Is the anomaly mode kind of just as a companion, or is it like harder? Is it meant to be harder than a heroic?
I wouldn't say it's meant to be more difficult. I think it's at like normal difficulty, but I don't think you can play heroic in anomaly mode. It's a totally separate mode. So like, okay. I think it's closer to normal difficulty, but it has like wacky rules. So basically, you can get like one of, I don't know exactly how many, but there's lots of different random anomalies that you can get that do weird things. Like each time you cast a spell, cast another copy of it with a random target. So there's all these crazy rules that are kind of like the weird stuff you see in Tavern Brawls, kind of brought into these adventures. So if you're doing some runs and you want to spice it up, you can try doing them with anomalies as well and see just how crazy a kind of run you can get. Yeah.
So all in all, I'm quite impressed with like the fact that this is still being provided at sort of a very similar gold and like even monetary cost as the previous things, and how much content you're getting. Like I'm quite like, and we're just talking about how much extra work actually had to go into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Speaking about the extra work, I mean, one of the things they pointed out as well is because it's set in the city of Dalaran, where most of the characters are like, actual speaking characters, they can't just make a bunch of monsters that growl at you for like bosses and stuff. So instead, they've had to voice all of these bosses and voice them, or almost all of them. There are some like unique ones which are, let's say, like magical, enchanted stuff. I don't want to give away the spoiler there for the one that I do know of that won't necessarily talk, but most of them are going to talk, and that means they have to have idle kind of voice lines for when they're just idling around. They're going to have specific interactions with like special cards, or possibly specific henchmen as well, maybe even interactions with because these are the defenders that you're playing against, right? They might have interactions with the Evil League boss that you're kind of helping out in that chapter. So there's so many different interactions that they have to voice. And then there's also like all the 9 different henchmen that you play. They have to give emotes for all of them, as well as like all the normal voice lines you have for a hero in Hearthstone, all the idle, the entry, the running out of time ones, all of those things.
So like, it's one of those things where you like, it's such a minor aspect, but like for work-wise, it actually I think took a lot. They put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
So like I'm quite excited, for this. It's kind of a slightly different spin, and it's also like I think because some people I think we're really getting like a bit bored of the Rise of Shadows expansion.
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of like the constructed meta.
Yeah, I mean the timing is quite interesting. I kind of. The timing I think is mostly down to how long it takes to kind of make this content, as well as wanting to split it out a little bit after the expansion. For more on that, like that'll be, I'll kind of expand on that in the second IGN article. I don't want to talk too much about the timing now, but yeah, it is probably good timing for a lot of those that are getting bored. And with a lot of this solo content, they've also made it specifically for people that really just like the solo content, right? That might not necessarily play much Hearthstone outside of just solo content. They actually really do consider those users or those players when building this solo content, which I found quite interesting. Which I think is why the dungeon run style works so much better these days over the old adventure style where you had to build decks. Because for a lot of those kind of super casual Hearthstone players, they won't have the cards to build the decks. They are mostly playing solo content, so they don't necessarily have very big collections. So I think it's great that it works for them. And the roguelike stuff obviously makes it a lot more replayable. And then there's a couple other things they've added. So as well, there's also lots of tracking for each of the things. So beyond just tracking all the unlocks that you mentioned, there's also like number of bosses beaten with each kind of deck and each different hero power. So there's just a lot of tracking for those people that want to, clock up really ridiculous numbers on their Burning Wit hero power or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like these nice little extra bits that I think like make it just that much nicer. People like showing off, oh, I got 100 wins with this hero, or
Yeah. I mean, one of the other quality of life things they added is kind of being able to pause mid-game. So I think this means you can kind of, I'm not sure you can disconnect and come back, but I think it might actually mean that I can't remember. We did ask them that, but I actually can't remember the answer now. It's just a while ago we did the interview. But I'll clarify that for the article as well.
Yeah, whether it's like just a pause mid-game or whether like, you can save, quit, and like come back tomorrow.
I think it is that, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, that's a huge quality of life change.
Yeah, because up to now, it's like, even though you're offline, if you disconnected, it basically still counted as like, you're disconnected against a real life opponent.
Yeah, but there's a difference between disconnecting and like purposefully quitting, right?
Yeah, sure.
Certainly from like an implementation perspective from a game dev. So those are two different things you have to consider.
Yeah, so I wonder if you have to save or if it like auto, like if you quit the game, if it like saves your state.
Yeah, because already you don't get roped, right, in dungeon runs. So that's not an issue. And then the biggest change that I actually think that's kind of like a quality of life change in a way, but also something that makes the runs more interesting is the friendly encounters. So during the run, you can have a chance to come up with one of these up against one of these friendly encounters. You basically are popping into the tavern and speaking to bartender Bob, who's kind of going to offer you ways to kind of change your deck. So basically the way this works is you'll have the two decks, the bartender's deck and your deck. It'll pull out 4 random cards from the deck, and you'll be able to use the cards that you have in your hand, which are special cards for the tavern. They cost coins instead of mana, and you have a certain number of coins, I think, which depends on where you are in the run. And so you can spend those coins to do things like recruit a minion from the board and add it to your deck. So you can recruit one of the minions from Bartender Bob's deck, or you can dismiss a minion from your deck. If you've got like, a Murloc Raider or something terrible in your deck that you don't want to draw, you can dismiss it using the coins as well. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing to help you refine. Maybe you started off on like a death rattle plan at the beginning of your run, and then it turned into like a big minions plan instead, and you have those kind of few last scrappy cards that don't really make sense in your deck, and now you can get rid of them to make your plan more refined, which is certainly going to help in like heroic mode in particular, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely heroic modes where you're going to try and want to gain every bit of advantage, right?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of the friendly encounters. I actually think if I had to pick a single thing that I liked most about this, it would probably be the friendly encounters. That's probably the one thing that I'm really hyped about. Like it just makes the whole experience more like refined to me. Like I want to build a specific refined deck. I don't know. Like when I start down a path, I don't want to change it.
You're such a min-maxer. even in your solo content, you want to optimize everything.
It's not about min-maxing. It's about like the strategy, the strategy feeling. Like it's about the feeling of like having a deck that makes sense together, rather than like optimized. Some weirdly slapped together. Well, it doesn't have to be like the best deck you could build. It like something that is very strict on its death rattle theme, or very strict on its big minions theme, or something like that, Sure. So that it feels like thematically it sticks to its theme more than whatever.
Less diluted.
Rather than just like playing an optimized deck, which might just be good cards and good curve. So it's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily saying optimized in that way, although you can definitely do the good cards, good curve thing too, which I'm not opposed to either.
Yeah, we know you, Deb. You like good cards.
Yeah, good cards, good curve. Who doesn't like good cards, good curve? And then speaking of good cards, one of the cards that you're actually going to get for completing all 5 chapters is Zale Shadowcloak. So this is a card you can use
Zale,
in standard. Yeah. The golden one. Actually, sorry, you get Golden Zale for owning for all 5 chapters. You actually don't have to complete all of them.
Oh, really?
So just once you own all 5 chapters, you'll get the Golden Zale Shadowcloak. Now, the normal version of Zale is craftable, but the golden version is not craftable. So you can only get the golden version from finishing this solo content. And Zale...
Actually, just having it.
Yeah, sorry, just purchasing the solo content. So Zale is a 2-mana 3/2 legendary minion, but all of that is irrelevant because Zale is much like Whizbang the Wonderful was, where you start the game with one of Zale's evil decks. So this is the only card you need in your deck, and you'll be playing one of Zale's evil decks, which is basically the recipes from Rise of Shadows.
Yeah.
So you're picking one of those recipes, from one of the 9 classes instead of Whizbang, which can give you any of the 3 recipes at random from each of the 9 classes.
So I mean, so that is a big sort of incentive if you are like a newer to play player, or if you are a budget and casual player. Like, it gives you access to cards that you might not have, or a lot of legendaries or epics. Maybe you decide you want to craft, like you're not sure whether you want to craft. You can play some of the decks that use them and see, if it's a card you really want to craft.
And the nice thing about Zale is because it's picking from a more limited pool, if there's some specific decks in there that you wanted to try out of the recipes, you have a higher chance of getting them with Zale, right? Than with Whizbang. If they were part of the 9 evil decks that you can pick from here. It's going to be interesting to see if Zale has a higher win rate than Whizbang.
Sure, yeah. But it could be a case of people have made the mistake already, so like you might even get less people might willing to try now.
Maybe. But I'm sure we're going to see some people like trying to get to Legend with Zale and stuff like that,
Sure.
Good old classic Mimi streaming content.
Yeah.
You got to have that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Okay, and then what else do we need to talk about with the...
Well, the Golden Classic Pack, but
the Golden Classic Pack as well. You get that for completing the 5 chapters. And then there's also the Heroic card back. So, I mean, that's kind of the classic reward for completing Heroic mode.
But other than that, I mean, it's a lot of solid content. I mean, even though it's coming out in a few days, if you just basically do your dailies, honestly, I think you should have most of the gold.
Dailies and some like ladder, some wins.
And some ladder and get some wins.
Yeah.
You should have enough gold to pay to get all of them, or shortly afterwards.
I mean, if you've been saving from last week when we at least told you to start saving, then hopefully you should
have enough. Yeah.
You should have enough, at least as the wings go by. Because they're only releasing one at a time. You don't have to have the whole 2,800 gold up front. You just needs to have 700 a week, which makes it more achievable for those that have the gold burn a hole in their pocket when there's shiny cards they want to play on standard and they want to buy new packs with that gold, and then they just can't save that gold, which is kind of like me sometimes.
Yeah, you see, I restrain myself. Like after I've bought pack or open packs and spent gold, I just start saving.
Yeah, I know. So disciplined. I can't look at that shiny number at the bottom and not want to spend some of it. It's fake make-believe money. I want to spend it.
Spend all the fake money.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I'm pretty excited for this. As I said, I'm going to have another article coming out on IGN this week, where I got to chat to the developers about the design process, which... Like, personally, myself, I studied game design at varsity, part of, like, one of my majors for my degree. So I found chatting to them about design really interesting. So, keep an eye out for that. I'll update the YouTube link or the YouTube description with that link as well when it's up. So if you're watching this after that's up, then check the description. Anything else you want to add? Oh, wait, there's one other thing that I forgot to mention about the expansion is with the 4 decks that you unlock for each class, the 4th deck is a randomized deck. So it is a randomized starting deck. So you go basically be getting 10 random cards, which is kind of takes widely from the pool of all cards in Hearthstone. So everything that's in Wild as well. So they have added some finickery to that random generation to try and give you like a decent curve and a decent balance of spells and minions. But that can also lead to some
it's
crazy
like the old deck builder, where basically it's like, oh, you don't have any 2-drops in your deck. Yeah, put these random 2-drops into your deck.
Yeah, put this Natpagel in your deck.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you don't have Blood Mash Thanos. try put a Bloodfin Raptor into your deck instead.
Yeah, so yeah, that's gonna lead to some interesting runs as well. I forgot there was one other thing I just thought of as I was talking about that. Oh well, yeah. So the 4th thing is completely random. And that should lead to some interesting stories. Now, there was one other thing. They did say the card pool for like what you get offered through the dungeon run type style when you're building your decks is mostly weighted towards the newer Rise of Shadows cards. And that. So it will include some wild cards, for instance, like maybe if they're going with a Death Rattle theme, they still offer you like a Sludge Belcher or something like that. But it will be mostly weighted towards the newer cards.
Yeah, they're still trying to show off shinies to try and get people to buy more packs, right?
Yeah, and I mean, they thematically make sense for Rise of Shadows, the expansion. So there's a little bit of a heavier weighting there with those cards. So you will expect to see a lot more of those new cards. And for people that only play solo content, it makes sense as well, right? Because that's like, if they don't play standard at all and they haven't played it since the expansion came out, this is going to be the one way they actually see those cards.
Sure.
Yeah, so overall, pretty excited for the solo adventure content. I don't often actually finish playing through all of it, but this time, because there's packs, I'll definitely end up playing through it on normal. And also because I appreciate that it's spread out over the weeks for that. For me, that helps with like finding time to play it.
Tough life, eh? First world problems.
Yeah, first world problems indeed. Okay, and then moving on to our kind of deck discussion portion for this week. I'm going to be talking about Spell Mage. So Spell Mage is one of the names that this deck's been given. I like calling it Do Stuff Mage, as I mentioned, because it's more kind of proactive in its strategies than the other kind of Conjurer Dragon Mage decks. The reason I like calling it Spell Mage is because, I mean, you can't really call it Conjurer's Calling Mage, right? Or Giant Mage, because both of those, the decks, the one that has spells and the one that doesn't, kind of have those two key cards in. The difference is with this deck, we have different kind of drawing options to the Book of Spectres, and we have different kind of synergy here. So like Mana Cyclone and Elemental Invocation are two of the big things that allow you to keep your hand full whilst still playing out all these cheap spells you have, especially with your Sorcerer's Apprentice and Questing Adventurer. I've seen some crazy Questing Adventurers with this deck. In fact, over the weekend when I was casting the EU House Rivalries, which is like a team tournament that they have going, that in one of the games there, the opposing team had a choice basically to kill a Questing Adventurer or to kill a Mountain Giant. They killed the Mountain Giant, and then the Questing Adventurer, which started at 2-2, became a 15-15 for lethal that turn.
That turn?
The next turn, yeah, when they chose not to kill it as a 2-2.
Yeah, you should have killed Questing.
Yeah, well, it was an inefficient kill. Like, it wasn't a kill. They had to like silence it versus killing the giant. So it didn't really work out particularly well. Or like, oh no, wait, I remember what it was. They had a 3-1 Banana Buffoon, the 2-2 Questing, and a giant, and they could have warpathed to kill the Questing and the Banana Buffoon, but then they would have left up the giant which obviously is a better target for Conjurer's Calling. So they killed the giant and left the other two up, and then that Questing Adventurer got really huge the next turn because of Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mana Cyclone, shenanigans.
This deck's got a lot of like little tricks and things because all of a sudden, Mana Cyclone can just generate tons of value, tons of stuff. Not to mention that like basically it generates even more because like your cheap twin spells.
Yep.
It's one card that generates that has two effects that then generates two spells of Mana Cyclone.
Yep. As well as Magic Trick.
In the Mage. Sorry?
As well as Magic Trick. I mean, it's similar in that scenario, right? It's a 1 mana spell that helps you that discovers a spell that costs 3 or less. So, like, quite often when I'm going off on that turn where I know I'm in a Mana Cyclone, I might just go Magic Trick into Magic Trick sometimes. You know, then and if you've got the Sorcerer's Apprentice on the turn, on the board usually in that turn, you've spent 0 mana, and you're going to get 2 spells back when you play your Mana Cyclone. So more often than not, my hand ends up full in that scenario. Or you can even discover like Ray of Frost off Magic Trick, and then you can get 3 spells from just that one spell. And that also means if that Questing Adventurer is on the board, you're getting extra activations on that Questing Adventurer.
For free.
Yep. And then there's also like Banana Buffoon, gives you the 1 mana spells, which, you know, once again, synergize with the Questing Adventurer, the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So this deck is a lot more proactive in kind of putting out threats there rather than just having to rely on the Giant Conjurer's Calling turns.
But ultimately, I mean, Giant or even like Rebel Bouncer, Conjurer's Calling is still very powerful. But like, I think what you're basically saying is like this deck can do a lot of other stuff that is pretty threatening as well. And it's not just reliant on that. Yeah.
So some of the lists also play Sea Giant. In this list that I have, this is the list I've mostly been playing on ladder. It has the Archmage Antonidas, which is like another way that instead of doing the Mana Cyclone at the end of a turn full of all those cheap spells with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, you can just rather play Antonidas, and then you'd get like a ton of fireballs, right? You can fill your hand with like 5-6 fireballs at least, because you are, you know, casting all those 1 mana spells for free with the Sorcerer's Apprentice,
and Magic Trick, and
the Banana Buffoon,
Frost.
Yeah, so like it's super powerful to generate lots of fireballs, which if you can apply some early pressure with a Questing Adventurer or a Mountain Giant is a great way to finish off the game, particularly against Warriors. That's actually one of the places that I find Archmage Antonidas most effective at finishing it off the game against Warriors. And then there's some other neat tricks. So Stargazer Luna is also in this deck. You can definitely play the deck without Stargazer Luna, but she has some cool synergy with something like Magic Trick. Because Magic Trick is a discover, it puts the card on the far right. So if you pick a cheap card that you can cycle the same turn with the Stargazer Luna, you get the extra cycle of Stargazer Luna, because Stargazer Luna draws a card whenever you play the rightmost card in your hand. Another interesting interaction to remember is that with twin spells, they actually replace the card in the same space in your hand. So like, unlike Discover where it goes to the far right. So if you cast a Ray of Frost that's in the far right, you're going to draw another card, and then the Ray of Frost will be the second to most right card. So you don't like draw off both, which is unfortunate, but a little bit more balanced, honestly.
Yeah, I was just saying, oh no.
Yeah, in this case, it's a little bit more balanced that it does that. And then Elemental Invocation is usually used with like Mana Cyclone, but actually, especially when you're on the coin, you can have an insane turn 4. Like if you've managed to draw on turn 3 with a Arcane Intellect or play a Banana Buffoon to buff up your hand size, you can go Elemental Invocation to reduce the Mountain Giant in your hand. And even though it costs a card in your hand, which increases Mountain Giant's cost by 1, it reduces Mountain Giant's cost by 2, effectively reducing it by 1, which would make an otherwise 3 mana cost Mountain Giant 2 mana on turn 4, if you have the coin. So you play the Mountain Giant, and then you can coin the Conjurer's Calling in that same turn. So you get to play a 2 Mountain Giants, or a Mountain Giant and a Grave Horror, or 2 Grave Horrors on turn 4, which is a pretty insane turn.
Fun and interactive.
Yeah, but it's important as well that you don't like You could just play the Mountain Giant out for 4 on that turn if you wanted to save the Conjurer's Calling for some reason. Maybe you wanted to save it for like use with Khadgar, but because Conjurer's Calling has Twin Spell, you never have to play to save Conjurer's Calling. You have 4 of them in your deck essentially.
Yeah, you can always
So you can be a little bit kind of loose with those Conjurer's Callings.
Sure.
And then the other one interesting interaction, especially if you're playing the Sea Giant list, is Khadgar plus Mirror Image. So Khadgar with Mirror Image summons 4 of the 0/2s, which makes the Sea Giant a lot cheaper. 3 mana to make Sea Giant cost 5 less, essentially. So that's one way you can really get out the Sea Giant. And then if you Elemental Invocation out a Mana Cyclone, that's another way you're making Giants cheaper without actually spending any mana. So therefore, you can make your Sea Giant up to 6 cost cheaper by just playing 3 mana worth of cards, which is pretty silly.
I still need to give this deck a try.
Yeah, there's lots of weird, interesting interactions like that in the deck. And then lastly, I mean, just for some mulligan advice. So this is a deck where being on the coin or not being on the coin makes a huge difference. And also particular matchups make a huge difference. And a lot of the time also combinations of cards in your hand make a big difference. So if you have a Sorcerer's Apprentice, you're more likely to keep a Questing Adventurer. If you have the Mana Cyclone, you're more likely to keep Elemental Invocation, or the same is true for Elemental Invocation and Giant if you're on the coin. If you're not on the coin, it's probably bad to keep Elemental Invocation most of the time, to be honest. So, there's a lot of interesting stuff, interesting kind of lessons you need to learn about when you keep which cards on the coin and off the coin. If you really want to learn more about that, just come check out the stream, because that's where I'm going to be playing more of the Spell Mage, and we talk about all of that stuff a lot. I might even go as far as making a mulligan guide for this deck specifically, because I think the mulligans are actually that kind of interesting / complicated with the coin. I think this is probably the deck in Hearthstone that I think being on the coin matters the most. In the mirrors, like being on the coin is like a 10% advantage. I think it's that big.
Oh wow!
I think in a 30 card mirror, whoever's on the coin is 60% favored to win the matchup. I think.
Wow.
Which is even more than 10% advantage, but yeah, I think it makes such a huge difference. You get the extra cards to mulligan, plus you have the reduced hand size for the Mountain Giant. And yeah, I mean, some people, we spoke even last week about nerfing Conjurer's Calling, and this is a deck that I think is so good it makes me think Conjurer's Calling might be worth a nerf. But what I actually think they might do is nerf Mountain Giant, because that's actually the problem. The problem is how early you can do it with Conjurer's Calling. It
always feels so bad when they if they decide to nerf a classic card that's been around for so long, because it feels like it just unbalances so many things that were balanced for the original Mountain Giant, right?
Sure, but you're basically taking Mountain Giant and Mountain Giant-esque decks out of the equation at that point. I mean,
yeah, and it's a case of
in Wild, it would negatively affect even lock and stuff like that. It would negatively affect hand lock in Standard, even though that deck is not exactly played that much. I do think it's not. I don't think it's terrible hand lock like the Control Warlock deck. The problem right now is that it can't really compete on a control perspective with Warrior mostly. I really Warrior and even Mage, the Mage has too many threats for the Warlock. Jirax's pales in comparison to Conjurer's Callings on Mountain Giants, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, I think that would be the one way to nerf Giant without having to break Mage, because nerfing Conjurer's Calling would hurt Mage. But it would make this deck the more... If you made Conjurer's Calling cost 4 mana or something like that, this deck would be a lot better than the other Dragon Mage. I think the Dragon Mage would essentially die off, because this deck has a lot of other... the Questing Adventurer win condition is a serious win condition in this deck as well. Okay, I think that's enough on this deck. Boring pandemonia, with the discussions of this deck. But as you can see, I'm really enjoying this deck at the moment. By far the most enjoyable deck I've played, probably this expansion. So yeah, I definitely enjoy talking about it. And I've actually been playing it in Specialist as well, in some recent Masters qualifiers, and it's been performing quite well. The first Specialist Open, the only game I lost was to the Mirror. Well, so at first, and then I was like 4-1, and it was 4 a.m., so I dropped. Because it was 4 a.m. But yeah. So speaking of Specialist, we're gonna get the first major Specialist esports event happening soon, of course, and that's the biggest esports thing for Hearthstone right now, and that's of course Grandmasters. So that starts this weekend. I think you were telling me the times for like the first games are early in the morning on Friday, South African, time.
For South African viewers, the APAC games start. The APAC matches start at 11 o'clock South African time on Friday.
11 a.m.
And they run.
Which is
11 a.m.
Yeah, which is for international viewers, South African Standard Time is UTC plus 2. I don't know why more people don't use UTC time instead of like PDT and SAST and all these acronyms that mean jack shit to half the people.
Sure. So
anyway.
that makes it 9 a.m. UTC.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then basically what they're doing is then after the APAC matches, then it's the European matches, and then it's the Americas, and then basically then Saturday. So
if I understand,
starts again.
Okay, so if I understand this, the way it's working is basically every player from every region will play every weekend. It's probably just one match, right? Because it's a round robin league.
Even.
Oh, some
it's a round
playing
robin.
Okay.
Some are playing. Some are playing 2 in a weekend.
Oh, okay.
I haven't directly checked. I'm not sure if anyone's playing more than.
I didn't even think they were going to play that many matches. I thought they would just do one day as like APAC, one day as EU, and one day as Americas. But I suppose
over the weekend looks like some of them. It looks like most of them play 2 to 3 times.
Oh wow, okay. So that's actually a lot of Hearthstone. I suppose are they broadcasting every match? You would think so for GM, sure. But if they're playing that many matches in a weekend,
I think that's why they've staggered them out though. That's why there's literally an hour gap in between each of them.
Yeah, I mean, basically, bar like the little bit of gap that's going to exist between the different regions, depending on when they finish. It's basically going to be Hearthstone all weekend. That's kind of what this translates to, right?
Yeah,
like particularly if you live like in the central, or if you live near like UTC plus 0, time zone like Europe or like South Africa Standard Time, where we're just 2 hours off that, then I think you're getting Hearthstone from like early in the morning all the way until late at night, right?
Well, let's see. Friday it says it's from early morning to midnight. Then Saturday it starts again at like it starts in the evening.
Oh, okay.
So it starts Saturday. Oh, wait. Oh, no, you're right. It starts Saturday morning again.
Yeah.
So literally, it's basically a whole... You can essentially watch Hearthstone the whole day. The whole weekend, almost.
So basically, anytime you want to watch Hearthstone on the weekends, you're going to have Grandmasters to watch now. Yeah,
pretty much from like 9 o'clock in the morning to late.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
That's pretty cool for like us in particular here that are located in a convenient region to kind of view all 3 regions. But either way, you'll have one region that makes sense for your time zone, kind of no matter where you are.
And if you really want, you can watch Hearthstone again.
Yeah. Are there any standout matches, maybe even just for the first day or so, that you think would be particularly worth tuning into?
So obviously there's Grandmasters, right? So there's big names everywhere.
Yep.
But kind of the one that stood out, like when I just glanced, the one that kind of first popped up was Viper vs Tice. 2 quite well-known players. Viper especially just coming off doing really well on the HCT.
Yeah, coming second at Worlds. And Tice is obviously very well known for his stream, but he hasn't really... I mean, he did compete in like the HCT tour last year, but he didn't really like go to many events and stuff. So he kind
And I
of
mean, Bunny Hopper versus Fenomeno Friday evenings. Also, I think gonna be quite a good match. And then you've got Muzzy versus Frozen.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that
so,
one. I mean, I'm a
so
pretty
like
big
that's
fan of Muzzy and Frozen, so I think that one's going to be pretty
so.
cool.
I mean, those for me, I think are the standout there. Like on Saturday, for example, you've got like Monsanto versus Zele. I think like I'm quite a big fan of Monsanto and Zele.
Yeah, I mean, we get to see Hunter Ace in action as well up
Oh
against
yeah, Hunter
Yala.
Ace, I think Hunter
And I
Ace
mean,
is playing Yala.
like a lot of people might not necessarily know Yala, but like he was I think he was second or third highest points earner in Europe.
Yeah,
which puts him amongst the highest in the world.
The Czech team, I think.
Yeah, I know. He's like a very very well known player in the pro scene and a very very strong player.
I mean, so yeah, I mean, because the EU is so stacked. I mean, then Saturday evening you've got Casey versus Orange.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Which I think is also going to be really good. Then just
Bunny
saying
Hopper
versus
versus Tice.
and I'm a big dog fan as well.
True. Same.
Just saying versus Dog.
Yeah, that should be really cool.
Just say it's played 2 matches like a few hours apart. That seems really weird.
No, I think. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the schedule. No, those are like so. Even though it says May 19th, that's for us, right? So the Just Saying Dog one is at 12 a.m. So then the next one is at 9 p.m. So that's 12. That's 21 hours apart, which is reasonable. Yeah, it says 9 p.m. There's a Zele versus Just Saying one, if that's the one you're talking about.
No, like I'm looking at like for example, Just Saying Zele is 9 o'clock in the evening, right?
Yeah, and Just Saying versus Dog is 12 a.m. So that means
those are midnight
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah, those are 21 hours apart. So I mean that's as much as you can kind of ask for in this.
Sure.
When if you're playing like 2 to 3 a weekend, right?
Okay. No,
I think it looks like most of the players are playing 2, but I'm
2 or 3. I think some players are playing 3. I think.
Maybe. So the way the Grandmasters works, for those that don't know, is we have like the 16 players per region, and they split into 2 different groups per the region, and then they play, I think, a double round robin versus everyone in their group. Not everyone will play every other Grandmaster in their region. It depends on the groups.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of Hearthstone action this weekend. I mean, it looks like almost every hour I'm seeing a match this whole weekend.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like you can watch Hearthstone.
Yeah, pretty crazy. And then moving on to some... actually, it's going to be the first big broadcast for Specialists. So it's going to be interesting to see what decks they bring. And if the meta is as warrior heavy and as rogue heavy as we saw in the esports arena tournament that they ran recently. There was like 13 out of 16 rogues or something stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is that better or worse than having that amount of warriors?
I think from a viewer perspective, it's slightly better. But anything where there's that many number of mirrors is going to be a horrible viewer experience. So let's hope not for that. I think there's some interesting decks that we could see, like the Spell Mage. I expect to see some people playing it. I think it's arguably the best deck in Hearthstone right now. So I think depending on when they had to submit their decks, we could see some people playing this Spell Mage. But obviously it's probably still going to be a lot of rogues and probably a lot of warriors. So we could have some of those games being control warrior mirrors, which will be interesting.
Like spectator, it's not the most...
You can take 1 or 2 every now and then, as long as there's just not that many, right? And how they're going to affect the schedule is going to be interesting, because that's been the big issue with the Masters qualifiers, is how long those the first couple rounds in particular take. Like every time I play and I'm waiting on a game, I go click on the game. Oh look, it's a control warrior mirror. I'm not even joking. It is always the control warrior mirrors that hold up the rounds.
Well, no, sure. I mean, I could have told you that. Like, it's always control warrior.
I think once I saw it was control warrior versus control shaman, but they both had Archivist Deliciana, so. That's still the offending card here, right? Is Archivist Deliciana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's going to be interesting to see this first big broadcasted specialist event, at least. The first
and we'll see. I mean, this is basically sort of the big trial run. Like, is it as bad as all the naysayers are saying it ought to be? I mean, because now this is
Yeah.
Blizzard putting on their big show of it, right? I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
this is their fanfare. They've been hyping this up, with the
yeah.
Grandmasters specialist.
Yeah.
So,
And if you want to find out like about these schedules and who's playing when, you can check out the new Hearthstone esports site. They like heavily revamped it. It's got like links to VODs and everything from Worlds as well. It's looking really good. Like I'm big, shout out to Hearthstone for finally putting together a good like esports site. Like this is kind of what we need, especially with Grandmasters, where we've got these specific matches, and like if you want to just watch that Just Saying versus Dog one, you can look at the time that it's going to be on the day, and that's going to help you a lot. So, and then probably once it's done, I imagine they're going to have these VODs like they do have below the schedule now with the games. So it's going to be very easy to go back and watch just the specific games you want to watch for the specific players you care about, and that's I think pretty good, or like really good finally.
Yeah, finally. I mean, and like you can filter it just by regions as well. They've definitely done a lot to make it a lot more user friendly and intuitive, I think.
Yeah, and all their news articles and stuff. The one thing I did notice on this site that I didn't know if they'd actually announced anything about was like under the legacy we have the championship tour, which is obviously the ACT stuff that's no longer relevant, and then we also have global games, which seemingly indicates that global games is being shelved as well, and that we're not expecting to see global games happen.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people talk about it, and I think it was kind of sort of a more quiet sort of under the maybe no one will notice. We just won't say anything about it.
Yeah, it seems like, weird from a communication. I mean, maybe I missed it, but if I missed it, that's also a bad sign of their communication because, I mean, I follow them on Twitter and like I'm pretty involved in the Hearthstone community. I would think I would have seen if they'd announced that Global Games was being cancelled. So it's a bit disappointing. Didn't super affect us, and I never really watched much of it because there were 0 African teams for me to even care about. No local teams, so that kind of immediately put a spanner in the works for my interest in global games. But yeah, I mean for a lot of people it is disappointing, especially considering last year how they added a lot of cool things with like the cheering and all that. The
cheers and stuff.
Yeah, I mean I think they're gonna do more Twitch integration stuff with. So they did it for World Championships, and I think they're going to do more for the Masters qualifiers, where like you can up Twitch the prize pool and stuff. Yeah, when you can up the prize pool by buying stuff related to it.
Do they do that with Dota?
Yes, but Dota is a totally different system where you get lots of in-game stuff that you can trade for like real Steam money at least. So yeah, I mean. Yeah, but look, Dota also have like they used to have the most simple system they used to have was they used to have tickets that you could buy in game, which allowed you to watch tournaments in game. And that was really cool. Like I loved buying those. They usually came with some cosmetics, like a courier or something like that as well. But I absolutely loved buying those, not for the cosmetics or even the ability to watch it, because most of the time I could go watch those tournaments on Twitch. But it was because I really liked supporting the tournaments, and usually like at least 25% of the cost of that ticket went to the prize pool of the tournament. So like in the early days of Dota, I really enjoyed that. So I wouldn't mind if they gave me a way to spectate Hearthstone games in client, where I could hear the casters as well, and I could buy tickets for it. I probably would. Like especially if it contributed to the prize pool.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential. I think they're starting to slowly get into it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk when they flip the cards around for spectator client. then maybe we can consider the ideas there. I almost feel like. That's like maybe a whole video on its own. Like just ideas for spectator client, right?
Tournament mode. Sorry.
What?
Tournament mode.
No. Just spectator client. Just the client. Just what spectating should look like.
What I'm saying is like upgrading that is basically is the platform for.
I know. Just being able to like preload spectators into a game, for instance, that's a huge thing as well.
And even just having like in-game, I mean, like you say, having almost sort of an in-game overlay, right?
Yeah.
Like if basically when we watch the HET, if I could see that similar kind of overlay in-game, with like number of cards drawn, the score, the player's name, because currently if you spectate even your friends, it's very bare minimum
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
what
the
was
only the
shown.
only way you get to know anything is if you're running a deck tracker to see those kind of things.
Deck tracker, or if they're obviously talking to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, we've kind of got off topic, but there is one other esports thing worth talking about, and that's the Metal Stage Pro Series, which is, and the Open Series, which is starting. So Pandemonia and I both failed to qualify for the Pro Series in the qualifiers, so we're both playing in the Open Series. But I'm going to speak to Metal State. Maybe I can cast some of the games and speak to some of the players. So just keep an eye out on the Twitch channel if you're interested. If there's any particular games, if there's any local people watching this, South African audience watching that want to see any particular games, just drop in the comments on the YouTube VOD which games you would want to see. And I mean, yeah, and then I've also been casting House Rivalries with Bemi, which is pretty interesting. Bemi's running production for House Rivalries. I've been casting with a variety of different casters from either America or Europe as well. And that's pretty cool. I mean, we already spoke about the Questing Adventurer thing that happened in the last week. But I mean, in the last week, they also, like, one of the teams we cast was Nordevent's game. And Nordevent obviously had Hunter Race playing for them in that game. So there's House Rivalries has a lot of really top talent. I mean, there's a lot of very, very good players playing in the things, with big teams playing, like Nordevent and Ents and quite a few fairly well-known teams playing in House Rivalries. So it's definitely interesting to watch. And another bonus is it's Conquest. So, that's fun to watch now that that's not the common thing we see anymore. So yeah,
Underground.
Yeah, that'll be on Saturday this weekend as well, as we kind of conclude the last couple of rounds of the Swiss. Just keep an eye out on my Twitter if you want to.
Oh, but then the global
out.
games. I mean, not global, but now.
Yeah, I know.
Grandmasters. So
but yeah, we can figure it out. If you want to find out, you can check my Twitter to find out when I'm streaming that or streaming normally. And for Pandemonia, you can find his Twitter below his face. Below his face over there, at PandemoniaZA. And mine is at @dib_gaming. Pandemonia's has lots of weird 3s and 0s. So good luck if you're only listening to the audio for this. You're going to have to search it up. So yeah, I mean, thanks everyone for tuning in. Looking forward to the solo content, which is launching on the 16th of May this week. And looking forward to Grandmasters as well right after that. It's quite an eventful time in Hearthstone right now.
Yep.
So that's all from me. Cheerio.
Cheerio.